Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Good afternoon to the Eurocities Mobility Forum, the last session of the day, but not the last session of the forum, as you have two further days after today. So a lot of discussion yet to come on urban mobility. This morning, we had the chance to hear from policymakers and from experts in the cities about measures and strategies to drive the transition towards climate neutrality on the ground, and also about the challenges and the needs of cities when it comes to the future EU urban mobility framework. Talking about the future, there's something new going on European level, the Climate Neutral and Smart Cities mission, which aims at reaching 100 climate neutral cities by 2030. To dive into this mission approach and what it will mean for cities, I am happy to welcome here today Matthew Baldwin, Deputy Director General for Mobility and Transport at DG Move, and also Manager of the Horizon Mission on Climate Neutral and Smart Cities. We have Philippe Froissart, who is Head of Unit for Future Urban and Mobility Systems at DG RTD, DG Research and Innovation. We have Annalisa Boni, Secretary General of Eurocities. We saw her already this morning, and she's still bouncing with energy. Still at the end of the day, that was her goal for the forum, so it's good to see she's still energetic. And Martin Russ, Managing Director at Austria Tech and member of the Mission Board for Climate Neutral and Smart Cities. And already this morning, Torsten Klimke from the European Commission already touched upon this mission concept and was already saying that it was really going to be part of the EU urban mobility framework. So maybe this is still a little bit new, especially for the urban mobility community inside Eurocities. So can I start with you, Matthew? You've been part of this exercise from the beginning. Could you basically just introduce this mission concept? Tell us a little bit about what its key characteristics are, and bear in mind that, let's say, we're a very layman audience, so please feel free to introduce it also in a general manner. Matthew, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Jean-Paul, and great to be with you this afternoon. I've had echoes all through the day of the discussions this morning, and it sounds very lively and interesting, and it bodes well for what we're trying to achieve, both on climate neutrality and on urban mobility. Just to correct you on one small thing, Jean-Paul, I'm operating under false premises in the sense that I'm the new boy in this panel. Both Annalisa and Martin have served distinguished members of the Mission Board for Climate Neutral Cities, and have actually produced us the raw material, the baseline, the launch pad, if you like, for our mission to keep the Apollo metaphor going. And Philippe Froissart has been running the mission team with the Mission Board for some time. So frankly, I'm not the one who should be saying about the origins of it, but seeing as you gave me the chance, I am delighted to be the mission manager. It is truthfully the most exciting thing I've done in a long career, and as you can see, I've been a long career inside the Commission, because we're trying to do something really very new here. I mean, I don't think I need to tell you why climate neutrality is important. I don't think I need to tell you why the city is such an important vector in all of that. But I think let's start with the 2030 deadline. We are in the middle of discussions in the Commission now on what we're calling Fit for 55, which is a great and slick slogan, but it's a tough set of discussions about how we get to a 55% reduction in our overall climate emissions and how we can pave the way for climate neutrality by 2050. And in all of that, and we've got some fantastic economic mechanisms, we haven't looked at the place-based focus that cities can bring to that. And that's why the mission report that we are now trying to put into an implementation plan to actually deliver, I hope, can be so crucial. Apart from anything else, the power of having 100 cities who are going to come forward and say, we're going to go all the way to climate neutrality by 2030, and we're going to pave the way for all cities to be there by 2050, I think is an intensely powerful signal for the Commission to be sending globally and as well to all corners of Europe, north, south, east, and west. And so there I have it. I've introduced the two twin objectives of the mission to get that 100 climate neutral cities and to pave the way for all others by 2050. We're going to build very strongly on the basis given to us by the Mission Board report, which is to focus again on the needs of an individual city through these things called climate city contracts, whereby the city sets out in probably a non-binding memorandum of understanding precisely how it aims to achieve that ambition, where its mixture of policy and financing needs are going to be. We will set up a mission platform, which we hope will be operational very soon, to be the guiding hand for the cities as they go through that exercise. And we need to involve member states, we need to involve regions, we need to involve the private sector, and last but not least, we need to involve citizens in that whole basis to make sure that this movement to sustainability is truly sustainable in the sense of long-lasting. We can't count on the political vagaries of a situation. We need citizens to be involved and engaged in the plans of their own city to become climate neutral. Not for the Commission, of course, to tell each city how they're going to do it. I imagine citizen engagement will look very different in Gothenburg from how it look in Naples. But it is the principle that we're doing this, as the Mission Board report said, with and by the citizens. The timeline, we are hoping to get a final green light from the Commission for our implementation plans in the coming weeks. That will enable us to launch a call for expression of interest in September. One thing we have refined or modified, if you like, from the Mission Board report is to compress a little bit the timetable, because the need for this thing is so urgent. So we're going to move straight from the expression of interest to what we call in RTD speak the co-creation of these climate city contracts as soon as possible. We want the first cities to be on the move from early next year. We hope the first contracts will be ready for signature even during the course of next year. And again, we want diversity. If we just have what I rudely call the usual suspects, the cities from the north and the west of Europe, the Copenhagens, the Leuvens, who've already committed to climate neutrality, we're not adding as much value. So we want to see cities from the south and the east of Europe, big cities, medium-sized cities, small cities, and of cities of different levels of preparedness. That'll be the value added. That'll be the innovative model that we establish for all cities to follow. And I'll stop talking now, because I can just talk for hours and hours bubbling with enthusiasm about the project, and it's tiresome for people to listen to. But that's the essence of it, Jean-Paul.
Okay, so for once, cities have their framework. They are the ones leading and driving the political ambitions on this mission, and they will need to be integrating a certain number of other stakeholders there. But they're in the spotlight. They're in the lead.
Absolutely.
You already, however, on the dance floor. But you already mentioned that not all cities possibly are engaged in the same way. Annalisa, how do you view that so far? So how interested are cities in general? But do you share that assessment that maybe some geographies within Europe are driving this more than in others? And do you think Eurocities has a role to play to get more cities involved?
Well, first of all, in terms of interest, I would say very, very big interest by many, many cities. Since I started talking about it in my capacity, of Mission Board rapporteur in October 2019, seems a life ago, the interest has always been very high. I mean, everyone understands the specificity of it, the potential of such transformative approach that there's behind this idea of the mission, an approach that is also different in many ways to other initiatives that exist in the EU, like Green Capital or Covenant of Mayors or things like that. So they really see that and they want to be part of it. That's sure. Now, cities are also cautious to commit to something that looks bigger than them, because it doesn't only depend on them. And so they are cautious to commit to something that doesn't come, for instance, with clear funding and financing associated to it, directly associated to it, or that doesn't, easily look totally realistic in their eyes, because 2030 is like tomorrow. And because there are so many challenges behind that. Behind the transformative, approach. There's, this idea of working with the different silos, but what did you call them, Martin? The different hemispheres of administration and policies.
That's
so
a
the
new
idea
one.
of having the hemispheres dance, so it's not dance together. So that's a huge, and having integrated planning behind that, that's a huge challenge. But also regulatory barriers in the sense of, having different legislation, be coordinated and talk to each other and so on at the different level from the European to the local. But there's also this idea of the social acceptance of the urgency, to achieve climate neutrality by people, because that's the real challenge as well. There's, the idea of having a new type of governance, a new form of governance and so on. So having a different way to work with the ecosystem at the local level, but also with different levels, as I said before. So the challenges are many. So I would say the interest is there for sure. And the effort from all of them to really try and go in that direction, but on the other side, they are also like looking, how can we do that? And that's where you were saying, geographically speaking, I mean, there are good examples everywhere, but it's more about where are the conditions to actually for them to be able to get there for 2030. So there are if you look at some countries where the national government is a little bit more, how do you say, less ambitious, then it will be more difficult for them, and so on. Or places where there is more funding available, then the situation will be different. So but we're trying to facilitate at least the information and trying to support them to go through, at least to analyze the idea and make sure that the sort of there is a willingness to go through and then and not create a sort of fear that it's too ambitious for many. So trying to make it more possible, basically.
Okay, so a strong interest, but you still also hear some caution, let's say, and maybe when we talk about targets, it does sound ambitious, but actually maybe the starting point is more important, and progress on a starting point is more important than necessarily reaching a target. It would always be easier to reach a target when you're already close to it than when you're much further away from it. So maybe that's something to consider. Philippe, what do you think is new about this whole mission-based approach? Why was it introduced as part of Horizon Europe? And what do you think it will bring to this new research funding framework?
Yes, thank you, Jean-Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. I think what is new is the approach itself of the mission that were introduced in the Horizon Europe Framework Program, which was that we wanted to have from the start with the mission an objective that was very ambitious but realistic, that was bold, inspirational, that would actually speak to the preoccupation and the concerns of the citizens. And in a nutshell, that's what the Climate Neutral Smart Cities mission is about. It's something that is indeed very ambitious but realistic, and I think we are confident that indeed 100 climate neutral cities by 2030 is realistic. We have evidence of a number of cities that have already made that commitment. What we want to do now is to move further and to use the mission as a step for a larger group of cities to come forward and commit to that objective of climate neutrality by 2030, or for some to a later date. I think what is new is the approach itself, and it was mentioned by Matthew and Annalisa that and Martin as well, that we want to move away from the, let's say, sectoral approach. We want to have a systemic approach, a holistic approach. I mean, these are big words, but concretely that means that the cities will have to change the way they operate, and they will have to change the way they operate to apprehend this transition towards climate neutrality. That seems to be just words, but concretely that's going to be very difficult and very challenging. And Horizon Europe as a program, because let's not forget that the missions are deep-rooted in the framework program for research innovation, which is Horizon Europe. Horizon Europe will have a role to play in providing the tools and the necessary support for those cities to develop that transition towards climate neutrality. And that is something that is it is new also in many ways, because what we have been doing so far in the past programs were to develop some specific activities, to address some very specific issues, thematic, sectoral issues. And we did not necessarily have in mind the need for replicability and upscaling of those solutions that were developed within the context of those projects. Now, this is really going to be at the core of the mission, the possibility to scale up those solutions to a much larger group of cities than those that have been the beneficiaries of the first projects that were supported by the framework program. Because we want to use those living labs, if you can use these words, that is a concept that we have been developing in the previous programs to a much larger audience. And I think this will be the challenge and the specificity of the mission that we are going to support in Horizon Europe.
If I may, Philippe, just one more question for clarification. In terms of the funding structure, will that be then a requirement on projects to include this scaling up element, or will it be further, or could you imagine further calls that would allow for the scaling up of projects? Just very briefly, just to understand.
Well, I think, the way we will develop the mission, and here we have to be a little bit careful because we are still talking about the mission as a proposal. So hopefully we will have a positive outcome of the discussion that is taking place, or that will be taking place very soon in the Commission. But we should be considering the mission as a portfolio of projects. That means that there will be a number of initiatives that will be launched to answer and to address the objective of the mission. Some of them will be in Horizon Europe. Some of the others will be actually supported by other programs that will have more focus on deployment of existing solutions. But when it comes to Horizon Europe, there will be a number of activities that will be prepared and that will be launched. Some of them have been mentioned already. So Matthew mentioned the mission platform. And this is an initiative that actually has been launched outside Horizon Europe. We took advantage of the Green Deal call to launch an initiative that was targeting the cities that were interested in becoming climate neutral. So in a way, we were responding to the objective of the mission without calling it explicitly, but we were referring to the Green Deal, because in the Green Deal, the idea was indeed to help cities becoming climate neutral. And so we took that as an objective. And we, through the mission platform, will provide some technical assistance to cities to help them develop their strategy for becoming climate neutral. So it's very much a service-oriented approach, which is looking at the demand from the cities and provide some targeted assistance to those cities in order to help them develop their strategy for climate neutrality, their financial strategy for helping the implementation of that strategy. And we should also be looking at more research innovation actions in order to support pilots and demonstrators that will identify the solutions that will be deployed in the cities as a result of this strategy for becoming climate neutral. So these are typically the type of activities that we will support in Horizon Europe. So there will be several calls targeting several needs and issues that need to be addressed in order to develop that portfolio of activities that eventually will be the mission.
Okay, thanks a lot for that clarification. Good to know that it covers more programs than Horizon Europe, and that it's really a holistic view on the development of cities. I think that's very, very exciting for this Eurocities network. Martin, can you also give us a little bit of an overview of your involvement, your views on this mission, and then I might follow up with a few more questions around innovation, which I know is key to your commitment as well.
And maybe I'm coming back to the systemic transformation aspect that Philip and also Matthew was referring to. I think this is really our crucial starting points where we as Mission Board started all our discussions. And I think it's really on where we actually have seen, we will not actually see the drivers, but the barriers, but we have seen those barriers now for decades. And we have said, okay, let's turn those barriers into drivers. So exactly, not just avoiding them, but working with them. You can't work against gravity. You can't just work with it. Yeah, I think this was maybe the thinking in behind it. And so the cities as innovation hubs, that they are catalyzers, not just for new ways of financing or for regulating things, but they are catalyzers to enable new things, and not just for, I think, this new way of maybe just letting things flow in your cities. Yeah, take more some certain, maybe it's too philosophical, but take not just the static elements that you need for quality of life. Take more a look into the fluid elements that can change, that can be agile, and so on. The small things, and I think this was also important. Of course, the whole city needs to have a clear strategy and purpose, but then please break it down into local activity. And I think these new forms of governance, as we always, what do we mean with governance? I really start hating this word now. I really have to admit, because every time when we see there's a blocker, then we talking about governance. What is governance? It's nothing else than you have a set of measures with different kind of responsibility, and you create an alignment. This is governance somehow, at least in my understanding. And so it has to go practical. It can't be on a general level. And the next thing is really these economic models, where, of course, we are talking in the research field a lot about value change and changing into value networks and thinking about cross sectors. But it's also what is really, really important for us in the economic model is circular economy. And not just about, in the mobility field, for instance, about asphalt recycling or battery recycling. Of course, these are important points. But if we think circular, then we also come to a thing that means not asset, but service first. Because services need far less resources than building something new. And then it's, how do we go from planning into operations? I think the first step is, of course, integrated planning to take transport, spatial things, energy issues, housing, and all these stuff, and all our fluxes in the city. But then bring it into operations, because normally we start doing good plans and then we hope, and not the right things are going to happen. And I think this is what we have to change, and we need the instruments. And this is really the place then where the smart technologies, the data platforms, the system modeling is coming in, because we have to understand the processes in a different way. If you try to understand something and have your kind of a dashboard, or you can even call it war room, then you can monitor certain things, you can model certain things, and there's a lot of mystery also there. And we have to avoid the mystery in the future when taking people with us. So it's about transparency in the thing. And maybe a last word on the ambition. It's such a great thing that the research community, and it's a key learning out of the latest research programs on European level, brought us to the mission thinking, so to say. Yeah, be ambitious. And so research and innovation is the starting point, but then we have to change on how the different sectors act. And I think what the Commission now did, this was not us as mission board, we gave certain advices, but this was really the Brussels administration, as we call them sometimes. They really did some great stuff. I've seen that, Matthew. The implementation plan is really, such a thing has never been there before, because it really has what our colleague Ellen Larsen called, it has length, width, and height. Length for it's a 10 years ambition. The width, that it's not just the public investment, but it's also the private investment that our private consume. And it's the height, which describes our ambition and our courage. And I think this is so important for the whole process. We don't know for each single thing if it works, but we have to try. And so the 100 cities, for me, this is not the final goal. It's just the starting point, because the 100 cities are also a means to getting the next 1,000 cities and getting the next 10,000 cities that can learn with the first 100. And this is so important. Thanks.
Yeah. Indeed, and you know, Brussels administration, but Brussels is also a place, you know, also a catalyzer. Okay, so that's I think an excellent overview, and you also mentioned the element of we have to look at what is fluid and not stay on what is static. So that kind of links me up nicely with then the topic of today, which is urban mobility. And if I go back then to Matthew, how do you see this mission-based approach influencing the way cities can approach the transition, specifically then on urban mobility? I mean, you at DG Move may have some good views on that.
Well, thank you. That was a wonderful intervention from Martin. It teed it up perfectly for me, because it's exactly for me about the having a clear endpoint, but then as Martin nimbly jumped over, an endpoint which expands, and that is exactly what we have to do. But if I may, the whole mission-based approach is fundamentally different, because in the past we might have said 55% climate neutrality by 2030. Geez, how can we get cities to do that? Let's fire off some great research projects and see what the best outcome is. And instead, we start from the other end, which is we need 100 climate neutral cities. What do we have to do to get there? Which, as Martin and Philippe and Annelies have ably said, means we start rooted in innovation and research, and we rapidly have to move beyond that to actual delivery. So to your point, it's exactly right. And let's take this example of clean urban mobility and why the city-based demand-driven process is so essential. It is not for the European Commission to say, all right, now listen up, cities. Here's how you're going to do sustainable urban mobility. Have you got a pen and a piece of paper? We're going to tell you how to do it. Because every city is different. Each city, if you take the difference between a big spread out city like Madrid or a tight, relatively tight city built around a medieval center, how you do sustainable urban mobility in both those cities is going to be very different. In Madrid, for example, I don't want to speak for them. I know they were very active earlier in the day. You know, you're not going to be able to do it without a big dose of electromobility. And so, you know, where you put your charging infrastructure into a city like Madrid, for me, again, I have not checked with them, is going to be fundamental if you're going to cover the wider metropolitan area. And one of the things we're trying to do is not to get too focused on, you know, what's the definition of a city. We may end up with, you know, the Brussels region, which is a city with 19 communes and very different. The Lille Métropole, the Île-de-France, Madrid, you know, is quite a big region too. We want to try to bring climate neutrality there as well. Again, to test out concepts. How do you work from an urban perspective, from the peri-urban to that connection with rural in a longer time? And how does a city do that? For me, it's about identifying and building up what I call the co-benefits of action. To let you into a little dirty secret, the benefits for a city's citizens of actually reducing its climate emissions is, per se, zero. They're invisible gases. But the actions that you take to deliver climate neutrality bring you the clean air, the less congestion, the fewer road deaths, the lower energy bills, the livable, lovable green cities that we all talk about and diagramize and fantasize about. And that is what will be so real to citizens. But it is for each city to identify how it's going to do that and how it's going to get there. Two more examples and I stop. Some people, including inside the Commission and out, have said, you're calling yourselves climate neutral and smart cities, but where's your recipe for how smart cities, how that element should come in? My answer is, what does a city need? I can't imagine a city doing it without using the latest smart technology. Building new ICT infrastructures to manage energy demand are going to be fundamental. But you don't need the Commission to tell you that. Another community, the cycling community, said the other day, where's your plan for cycling as part of the climate neutral city? Again, I can't imagine a modern European city doing it without cycling, but you don't need me to tell that. What you need is the end objective, and that of the city to build that up, to co-create it, to identify, and on mobility, I think this is a testing thing, to identify the revenue streams to support the loans. And that is a challenging task, and that's something we're looking at. And that's how you need to get creative with your finance and your finance flows. And again, final point, to let the citizen to invest in their future. If you ask citizens if they could invest in a green bond or in a sustainable finance package involving their children, their street, it's so much more real. And that's when the things really start to become exciting, which is why the local finance providers, the local banks, I think, are going to be a crucial part of this puzzle. Sorry, it's a bit of a rambling answer, but Martin always gets me going. And in answer to his point, you can't fight against gravity. I fight against it every day, mate.
Laughing into a microphone is never a good thing. So we have to try and hold it. Annalisa, comment on that, because what I'm getting from Matthew is that this mission is almost like a political signal, but operationally speaking, it's really going to be down to cities to make their choices, right? Is this not something that, in a way, Eurocities could really do and could support the Commission in this?
Yes, it's their choices for sure, but as I said before, it doesn't depend only on them, and that's the exact point around the climate city contract and a new type of governance. So meaning we have to, in a way, move on from move not away but move forward, compared to those initiatives where cities were the only responsible for achieving the targets. Here it has to be a sort of more collective approach to it, a mission. That's why the idea of a mission is interesting, because it has to be a mission that is interesting for Europe, for the national government, for the city administration, the regional administration, people, so that everyone plays a part and has a responsibility and bear that responsibility. So it's really that. So of course the city is seen as the one that can orchestrate or can share power with other stakeholders and other levels of government, in this case, to achieve it. But of course it has to be a sort of full orchestration of all that. And what we can definitely help with is to put people together, put good practices together in the different areas. And there, I don't mean only the sectors. It's also, for instance, in the governance. You don't like that, Martin, but how we work, how cities have been actually working with their ecosystem and people. What does it work actually to create this sort of social acceptance and so on? Or how do you co-create a strategy and so on? Or how do you build up a climate city contract with other levels of government and so on? So this kind of exchange, so that's where we can help, and where, in also trying to push the different maybe national environments to create the environment to support their cities, because I think that the national element is fundamental there. You need to have a sort of, like it exists, maybe it's coming up quite well in Austria, in Sweden, or in other countries, I think in Spain, where you have a sort of this positive environment, encouraging environment for cities to say, okay, yes, let's go, and let's make it a national mission as well. Yeah. And so there we can try and again, provide evidence of other countries, how it works and so on. And of course, in the sort of scaling up of what works, and the different solutions that come up, the measures and so on. So how can we actually scale up by creating learning environments in this respect?
Okay, and I think Philippe was also touching upon the different parts of the Commission funding options that also need to work together in supporting all of this, putting people together, as you said, Annalisa. Philippe, in relation to then clean and urban mobility, how do you see this mission-based approach supporting that, the transition towards clean energies in urban mobility? Some of the other tools that might exist, the EIT urban mobility, for instance, or Civitas, how do you see all of this coordinating?
Yeah, it's a good point. Indeed, when it comes to urban mobility, we can contribute through the frame program Horizon Europe. And you mentioned Civitas. Civitas actually will be supported through Horizon Europe, and we have actually launched already, or we will be launching in the Work Program 21, 22 of Horizon Europe already an activity for Civitas. There will be other, and there should be other opportunities beyond Horizon Europe, but maybe I will focus a little bit, if I may, on Horizon Europe in that context. Because when it comes to urban mobility, I do not exclude the possibility for us to draft some activities and topics that will be specific to urban mobility. But I think most of all, we have to take into account what is already there. And for instance, we should benefit from the partnerships that will be launched as part of Horizon Europe that can contribute to the implementation of the mission. I mean, I can give you a few examples there. For instance, the co-funded partnership Driving Urban Transition has a component which is specifically targeted at the 15 minutes challenge that cities can take up, and that is typically something that is of concern for the urban mobility aspect. When it comes to urban mobility, and particularly zero-emission mobility, we should take into account the fact that we have already a partnership on zero-emission mobility that can also contribute to the implementation of the mission. And what I would say is very likely for the future, when we will be able to roll out the activities of the mission, we will very likely interact and cooperate with those partnerships to develop specific activities that can be implemented as part of these partnerships. Same go with connected and automated mobility. When it comes to shared automated mobility, this is something that can contribute to climate neutrality to some extent in cities. And for instance, when it comes to the deployment of those solutions, to the integration of these infrastructures into cities, the partnership on connected and automated mobility can contribute. But outside Horizon Europe and outside and beyond those partnerships, there are also programs like Connecting Europe facilities that will support the deployment of those solutions that will be coming from not only the partnerships, but from the more traditional research innovation actions that will be supported. And needless to say, there are many opportunities outside these programs. You have structural funds that can contribute. You know very well that there is a quota, if I can use this word, of funds that will be spent on the cohesion policies that have to respond to the objective of climate change and are targeted to urban development. There is the resilient and recovery plans that also will be able to contribute to the implementation of the mission because, and we have seen it already from the national draft that have been circulated, there is a strong component on urban mobility that you will find in these plans that to a large extent respond to the objective of the mission. So at European level, at national level, there will be opportunities for helping the deployment and implementation of the mission. That goes well beyond Horizon Europe.
Okay, that's good to hear, I must say, for cities. However, Annalisa also mentioned this question of caution. Some cities are still a little bit cautious on this whole project. Martin, how do you see that? I mean, should cities be worried? Like, let's say the urban mobility practitioners, right, in a city, should they be worried that their city goes ahead and signs a climate city contract and, you know, goes for this target? Like, should they be worried? What will it mean in practice for them? What kind of changes will they need to implement when the city turns back to the urban mobility department and says, right, you know, we've signed this contract? Should they be worried, or do you think there's mostly opportunities here?
If you worry about change, then be worried. Yeah, I think this is maybe a very simple answer to that. Of course, it will change the way on how we deal with this, I think, huge endeavor that we see when tackling climate change. And I think this should be very, very clear. And I'm coming maybe back to what Matthew said on the change process, that not looking into the clear, targeted, narrow impact, yes, zero CO2, yeah? But looking into the benefits, looking into the competences, looking into the processes that we have to create, that we can make it happen. And I think it's it's a different and a new kind of ambition, because I think this is what we do is not just taking new technologies. We are changing the mobility play and cookbook. Yeah, and it's what the mission is then doing. It's not just bringing new recipes; it's building a new kitchen. Yeah? It's maybe a molecular kitchen style than we do that, and so this really brings us to totally different kind of recipes and the new thinking on what. It's not just transport. It's what mobility does for us every day. It's the catalyzer for our lifestyle. So when you go into, I think there will be not a one size fits all thing. When you plan and build infrastructure, it's good for everybody. So a cycle pathway is good even if you don't cycle, but a road is there for everybody. But the learning for the administration is you have to look into purpose-driven solutions for specific target groups. And so you do target group-based policies. And not even that, as Annalisa said before, let the silos dance. And I think it's not just changing mobility and the way from A to B, but it's changing the way on how we shop and how we work and how we spend our free times with our friends and families and stuff like that. So the mission is a lifestyle enabler, and we have to look, especially in mobility, is a catalyzer for the whole mission. And this is what we've also heard from the whole co-creation and participatory examples that we did from different cities. This is the first things people recognize when you change something in the city. It's public space and mobility and accessibility of your surroundings and the possibilities. And this not only for us as individuals, it's also for the companies and for industry that we change things here. So it's really this kind of the play and cookbook and the kitchen. That's the key.
Yeah, in a way, you're basically saying that my question is wrong in itself. It's not the urban mobility department that needs to be worried. It's all departments, in fact, need to be equally worried if they're worried about change.
They should be happy about the new possibilities that they get.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Martin. If I go back to you, Matthew, this change, right? Is it going to be disruptive? So does it have to happen now, be very disruptive, very aggressive to kickstart a massive revolution to reach the targets by 2030? Or do you expect something more gradual with small steps along the way? And what would be some first successes that you would consider in this journey to 2030 in urban mobility as much as possible? And a quick unmute.
Apologies, the first unmute moment of our seminar. I'm really enjoying this discussion. I'm trying to keep up with Martin's metaphors, which are very rich, and language is terribly important. And you just used two words there, Jean-Paul, disruptive and aggressive, which when I was growing up, if you were a disruptive pupil in school, you were sent out. And if you were an aggressive pupil in school, you were sent to see the headmaster. These are two negative words, but they have been adopted. We have co-opted, co-created these words as things which are positive in their change. And the flip side of them, and that's why I'm going to take a small risk now, had I delivered such a wonderful speech as Martin just did from the perspective of the Commission, I think that could have been genuinely quite worrying to some people. And I want to just balance it up a bit by saying that, yes, change does worry people. And I don't want to be one of those people sitting in his ivory tower in Brussels saying, don't worry about change. And if you're not with the program, you're a loser and the rest of it, because then we quickly become the opposite of Margaret Thatcher, who said in the 1970s, if you're still riding a bus or if you're on a bicycle, then you're a loser in life. And, I don't want to sort of be too prescriptive with that from the Commission. So start from the beginning point. We're doing this thing about climate neutrality, not because we're a bunch of crazy white metropolitan elite, but because we've got to do it. It's existential. We know we have to do that. And the question is then, how do we facilitate that? And I think we've identified in this discussion that cities are a tremendous vector for doing that. And I come back to Martin's metaphor. about kitchens and recipes, because, you know, yeah, there's going to be some new kitchens needing construction, but, you know, I don't want to scare the horses and say, right, listen up, you've all got to do everything differently right from the start. Your governance is rubbish, and this department doesn't know what it's doing, and we got all the answers. And to come to Annalisa with the Italian thing, there's a very traditional Italian cookbook, which I'm sure Annalisa's got, Il Talismano della Felicità, the gateway to happiness. But it's very much like this. You follow the recipes like this, and you don't add an extra egg or another bit of spice. And I want a recipe book which is modern and adaptive, and the cities are writing it themselves. With us, we're looking for the solutions. We're trying to make the family happy to make the great meals, right? And that's where we've got to make it happen, to make the co-benefits flow, to fly smoothly to this target. I'm sorry, it's this metaphorical soup which I've been invited to jump in on. But in all of that, don't dismiss people's fears of change. Don't dismiss people who say, I'm worried I really don't have the money to re-insulate my house. Because sometimes the answer is, well, you know, here's somebody who can help lend you the money, and just look how quickly the payback's going to be. I don't know how I'm going to deal without my car. Well, look how great it's going to be when your kids can walk or cycle to school and you don't have to worry about it. And so to see those broader things, and not to dismiss people's worries, but to address them and to try to find solutions for them is part of it. And it is an intensely political process and a fascinating one.
Yeah, you don't want to upset la nonna with a poor outcome on a recipe. That's probably why you better follow the rules, nevertheless. But maybe that's a rapport with authority that maybe we also need to change. What you're saying is possibly linked then to one of your initial comments around citizen engagement, which needs to happen constantly throughout this process. There's a comment also in the chat that I can see on the event in relation to the size of the cities that can engage in this process. Annalisa, do you see this mission as being something for the larger cities, to some extent the ones that also maybe carry the larger share of the responsibility? Or is this something that also smaller cities can get involved in, and maybe there are lessons to be learned in the way smaller cities get involved, especially on citizen engagement?
I think that we've discussed a little bit about the minimum size, and we talked about 50,000, 100,000. I mean, in order to have an impact in terms of inhabitants as well. But I mean, here the point is not about big or small or whatever, medium. It's really about the ambition. And I think the willingness and this idea of wanting to cook a new type of recipe, and therefore wanting to experiment a new way of doing this policy, of stretching, of really going beyond and, taking the box and put it next to you, not thinking inside the box. So it's really about, a decision, a conscious decision that this is a different thing, and that can help, moving forward with your own strategy of wanting to create a greener city, a healthier city, and so on. That's part of the recipe. But of course, the recipe and as I said, the ingredients have to be there, and the recipes have to also be given by people, by citizens. And so that's why we've put that in the title. It's not just about climate neutrality, it's about climate neutrality for and by the citizens, doing it with them. And when I say citizens, I also mean about all the sort of local ecosystem and so on. But I mean citizens in particular, because they are political actors, they are users, they're producers, they're consumers, they're owners of buildings, owners of transport means, and they have a lot of roles. And so this has to be recognized. And that's why, for me, this idea of social acceptance, and then making them understand this idea of co-benefit and the bigger picture, and also, looking at, how their role can be there, what kind of responsibility and their power actually is, again, as I said before, where is it? Where does it lie? Do they have power? So that's why it's important that cities don't just do sort of artificial citizens engagement thing, but they may experiment and fail and so on, but there's no point in just doing tick the box thing of like we used to do, consult because you have to build, I don't know, whatever infrastructure, but it's really about co-creation. And there I think there's a lot of, help needed to think things differently and do things differently.
And that leads me then back to Philippe. When I came to Brussels first, I think it was 2007. Must have been FP6, well, at least the legacy of FP6 moving into FP7.
I started with FP4.
You started with FP4. It seems to me that innovation has come a long way as a concept inside the Commission, and I wouldn't mind you reflecting a little bit on the concept of citizen engagement in innovation, in the framework programs, in Horizon Europe now. Will there be a space for this? What shape will that take? And especially then connecting to this mission-based approach. And maybe also a comment on one technological aspect linked to citizens, which is data. Maybe today there's never been so much data available on behavioral change, on preferences, and particularly in the field of urban mobility, this is something that many operators are working with. A comment maybe on how you will be approaching this in the context of Horizon Europe.
Yes, I think when it comes to citizens' engagement in particular, we have shown that cities are not short of good practices and ideas, and I think that's one of the interest of the mission on cities, is that we can rely on the expertise and the experience of city local authorities in engaging with their citizens. So I would say, rather than just the Commission telling cities how to go about it, because I think we are not necessarily the best persons to do that, we have to rely on the good practices that have already been developed by the city authorities. Having said that, and I mean, just to complement what I was saying, we have shown that, I mean, last year in particular, we organized more than 12 events in different cities all around Europe, thanks to the commitment of the members of the mission board and the commitment of those cities that were engaged into that process, and that was very useful. And I think, I mean, if I can say that now, I was personally a little bit skeptical when we launched that mission about the interest of engaging with citizens at this very early stage of the development of the mission. And I have no shame in saying that I was wrong, because that process proved to be extremely useful. And now we really put very prominently the citizens' engagement dimension in the mission, and we will tell the cities that want to commit to the objective of the mission that this is one of the essential elements that needs to be taken on board in their application for the call for expression of interest, and they will have to demonstrate that concretely on the ground, and we will help them develop that dimension through the support activities and measures that we will put in place. So this is something that will be part of the process of the mission, and the cities that will commit and that will be moving with us in that process will necessarily develop comprehensive citizens engagement activities. Now, the management of the data, it's also something that we need to take into account, but it is more global than just for the cities, for the mission itself. And we have rules and conditions on that. This is also something that is very present in some of the transitions that the cities will need to undergo, and particularly, for instance, when we are talking about the connected and the smart dimension of the transitions of the cities in climate neutrality. So this will be part of the whole process, and we will benefit from the experience that we will develop in Horizon Europe to help cities in managing this issue on data, for instance.
Yeah, it seems quite key, because there will be many private operators having access to what could be considered public or what should be publicly owned data, right? The data of the commons, the data of the citizens, you know. So maybe here there's a bit of a tension point, I would say, in the rollout of such ambitious measures. Martin, maybe a comment also on this citizen engagement. To some extent, Philippe was also saying at the very heart of the process of setting up the mission, citizens were already engaged. if I understand it correctly. So how do you see that involvement down the line? Quick unmute, Martin. To hear your metaphors, It'll be easier.
I think I'm as Philip also pointed out, I think in the very beginning, of course, we thought it would be generic, but the results and the feedback we got, even from these online forms of participation in this very first phase, were very, very substantial and showed us the way. Of course, there's a long way down to go from participation to co-creation and really enabling. But I think there's also good examples and good cookbooks for doing this, and good processes and procedures to follow that. But I think, let me also come back to the data issue a little bit. Maybe this is also a circular economy approach. So what about data recycling? We always normally data has a specific purpose, but I think what we should look into is really combining different services and letting those actors make use and potential out of their data and data ownerships and service integrations that come along with the real service offerings they do. So, for instance, a public transport operator should be on and stay in his capacity to integrate certain other things. And you don't have to have another player. It's just on how we link all the different service domains and the data silos. And we have great European concepts alongside with the European data strategy, like Gaia X and so on. We have the priority action A and other things. And also, I think there's a lot of tools that we have to make use of to create this better understanding. But back to the users, I think we have to work more on not just testing and validating those kind of technical tools and what we make with data, but show the real experiences and create these kind of evidence layers also towards the people, that they understand what's going on and what's their impact. So not just calculating footprints every couple of years in a very generic way, but really giving us as citizens a tool that we can act along and bringing our, let's say, potential behaviors and our real behaviors a little bit closer together. And I think because this is also what we need and what we have to address with the ambition of the mission. And I think this is really part, because it's our behavior that will change not just the climate to the better, but also change the possibilities for new businesses. And there comes the alignment with the economy, and not just with the big ones that always get, I think, then the bigger part from the cakes, but with local economy, but they work with common European tools and the common European mindset in the common European market. Because this is what the mission is also about. It's an actual market failure and the transition failure that we try to address with the mission. And we should not forget about that.
Okay, thank you for that reminder. And maybe indeed the public realm, as some like to call it, in 2030 will look very different to the cities and the public realm that we have today. There's a lot of work, a lot of reclaiming of space to be done, and hopefully for the good of the planet as well as of people and their lifestyles. We are approaching the end of this session. It's been a tremendous debate with a lot of inspiring remarks. I would like each of you to finish off with a 30-second call to action to all the urban mobility practitioners, city-level policymakers that are listening in today on essentially getting involved into this mission approach. Matthew, let me start with you. Your 30-second call to action.
Well, I want to base it around the unpleasant theme of COVID, and a big picture theme and a small picture theme. The big picture theme around COVID is, I think a lot of people felt that the Commission was going to back down from the European Green Deal because of the pressures we were facing. And instead, we haven't. We piled on the pressure because we know we have to, and we know we can deliver on the Fit for 55
Oh dear.
COVID.
Matthew. Yeah. Okay, Matthew.
No,
You were frozen there for a second. So
sorry.
can I give you back 20 seconds? Please finish.
And then I will yield back the balance of my time, like they do in the House of in the Congress. But so I was trying to make the big picture that with COVID, we have not backed down from our climate targets from the European Green Deal because we have to do it and we know we can do it. The small COVID picture is exactly what you were just saying a moment ago, that when we look at the changes that are happening in our cities as a result of the pressures of COVID, the need to rethink space, to rethink our mobility. And these two factors, the very big picture and the very small picture, and the cities as the place where these things come together, the vector for change, is why I fundamentally believe we can not only do this, but we'll probably look back 5 years down and say we weren't ambitious enough.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. You were very inspirational in this panel. Thanks a lot for having taken part.
But I had fun anyway.
Philippe, your 30-second call to action.
Well, I would say that for cities that want to be involved, they need to be aware of the progress of the mission and keep track of what we are going to do. I mean, Matthew mentioned the call for expression of interest that we want to launch towards the end of this year, and so as soon as this is going to be published and announced, I mean, I'm sure Eurocities will do its utmost to promote and raise awareness. But I think it's an opportunity for cities to get ready and be prepared. I think when it comes to urban mobility, whatever the opportunities, whatever the activities that cities want to be involved in, they will have to keep always in the back of their mind, does it make sense in the context of the mission? And I would say this is how we should think now in the next few years, and to relate all the activities that are around the cities within the objective and the context of the city's mission, so that we actually contribute to the mission fully.
Okay, thank you very much. And you shared a lot of insights on many areas where cities can get involved, a lot of potential for funding also, maybe more than there's ever been, to be honest, for cities in such a structured manner inside the funding programs on research level. So thanks a lot, Philippe, for having shared all of those insights and for being part of the panel today. Martin, 30 seconds, your call to action with an unmute.
The first thing is you have to unmute to go to action. Of course, I would second the public space management and the access management, of course, that Matthew was pointing out. I think this is crucial on how we deal with public space. Make use of UVARs, urban vehicle access restrictions, and also the technical details into that. Take a look into automated services, don't fear. Take data as an enabler and think service first instead of infrastructure. And go for this cross-sector collaboration, because this will be crucial for the financing of the new mobility options. So think on not building any more parking lots at shopping centers, but to deal with service obligations, or not building more garages for each flat, but mobility hubs in our living areas. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Martin. And you took us up and down the dictionary there throughout this debate. So that was really great to hear from you. So much inspiration, I believe, for the Eurocities network. Thanks a lot for having been part of the panel, which leaves me for Annalisa for the last 30-second call to action to your members.
So call to action to our members: dare. Don't be afraid. Think it as an opportunity to build forward better. Think that the time is tight, but the time is right. Because also what Matthew said, both of the small and the big pictures. So it is a unique moment where either you do it now or you don't do it anymore. And a call to the member states and the Commission, I would use a cartoon soundtrack. You got to move it. You got to move it. I don't know if you read it. We got to move it. I mean, we need to move it, right? Come on, let's do it.
This is the music we go off to. It's our signature tune at the end of the session.
Yeah, maybe we can find that. If we can find that and plug it in, we'll try that. Thank you so much to all of you for the energy that you brought at the end of this day. Thank you to all the participants who joined us online for the day. Tomorrow, join us at 10 a.m. CET. It's the peer-to-peer exchange session. You'll be able to talk with colleagues from all over Europe about public space, data, and mobility as a service, and electric public fleets, many of the things that we've already touched upon. I hope that you're left with a lot of inspiration. Maybe your head is a little bit spinning like mine, but you can blame Martin for that. And certainly, it's been a great pleasure to be part of this day and this exchange. Good luck to all the cities involved in this mission-based approach, and see you next time.